Mark Duplass co-stars in Apple's new drama, The Morning Show, about a morning news program undergoing upheaval when its anchor is suddenly fired. So first off, Mark, what did you think of the show when you first read the script?
Well, I was excited by it. I mean, there's a lot of exciting elements on paper right away, which is the chance to work with Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon and Steve Carell and Billy Crudup. The cast all around is amazing. And I think the idea of being Apple's big flagship show was really exciting. There are a lot of things being made right now, and you're not sure if anything is going to get seen. And I felt pretty sure that Apple would make sure there were some eyeballs on this show, so that felt good. And I think the thing that really got me excited about it, almost more than the scripts and the content, was this feeling that Jen and Reese had partnered as producers. This was a big passion project for them. And I remember thinking, like, this is kind of the phase of their career where they could be just cashing paychecks as actors and not having to work so hard, but they were so hungry and so passionate about this story. And I felt like I should support that, and I wanted to support that. I grew up as a filmmaker, and I'm always looking for performers who sort of buy into what I'm trying to do. And I really felt like, Mimi Leader, our director, and Carrie Aaron, our showrunner, and Reese and Jen, these women had something they wanted to say and do that they felt strongly about. And the fact that they wanted me to be a part of it was kind of a no-brainer.
And, you're playing this character who's kind of caught in the middle of all this upheaval, producer of The Morning Show. What did you think of that character who is sort of dealing with these power struggles that are going on around him and trying to just keep his own head afloat?
Yeah, I sort of immediately fell in love with the character of Chip Black because, he struck me as this sort of nervous Captain Kirk trying to keep the ship of The Morning Show afloat, and the more I learned about morning news and, you're putting on 2 to 4 hours of live TV 5 times a week, it's just so precarious. Anything can go wrong by accident. But then when you involve, a big sort of drama like what happens in our show, and you involve all the different personalities who could abuse that live format to get their needs across. It just seemed like such a great format. And for me and my personality to play a character like Chip, who's really at the epicenter of it all, and he's trying to, he's Atlas. He's trying to keep the whole thing afloat. It felt so complex, and at once it is something I could understand, and that, I've produced independent film and things like that, and that is very difficult, but at the same time, wildly different as a person than I am. He utterly denies all aspects of himself. He has no life, no wife, no friends. He barely sleeps at the office most of the time. He barely takes time for a meal. It's all about the show and trying to keep journalistic integrity alive. And I sort of admire that in a person. It doesn't lead to a happy life, but it was interesting to sort of play at.
And interestingly, you yourself have produced and written and directed, in addition to your work acting. Of course, your work has had much different circumstances from your character on the show, to say the least. But has elements of your own life and career in TV, sort of inform how you looked at sort of this particular environment that your character is in?
I think there are definitely some elements. I think anyone who has been in a position of feeling like there is a Herculean task ahead of me, I don't know if I'm going to be able to accomplish this, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to accomplish this with my integrity intact. And that is something I think a lot of people face, for better or for worse. In most corporate environments, in order to get what you want, to rise to the top, you have to lie, cheat, and kick and steal. And Chip has tried to avoid that in the past, but it's getting harder and harder for him, and I know that, again, as I've made a bunch of independent films and independent TV shows, and you're sort of fighting the odds and trying to make something decent against the odds, you come up against a lot of moral and ethical challenges about what is, quote unquote, the right thing to do. And as I've gone on in my career, it's actually gotten easier for me as a person to do that, because I'm more in control of my destiny. But a guy like Chip, he's at the center of the show that happens to be the ratings center of that network, and he's in way over his head.
And at the center of the show and the drama happening on the show within the show is this Me Too scandal. The anchor has been fired for misconduct, and it's fictionalized, but it resembles certain scandals we've seen in real life in the past. What were your thoughts on sort of this take on this particular period we find ourselves in the entertainment business and honestly in just the world in general?
Yeah, I really liked again what Carrie, our showrunner, and Mimi, our producing director, and Reese and Jen were trying to do here as a female-led show that tries to do an in-depth dive about power struggles in the workplace, through the lens of a Me Too story. And what I thought was cool about it is, their take was like, well, let's take 10 hours to do this, like 10-hour-long episodes. We're not going to do this in a headline. We're not going to do this in a 5-page article. We're going to have a huge cast so that you can examine, not only the victim and the victimizer, but the people around who were in positions of power, the people who weren't in positions of power, the people who saw things and maybe didn't say something. And I really like the aspect of trying to more fully flesh out that story and do it in a fictionalized environment where they had the latitude to explore it as they saw fit. That seemed really cool, and it seemed really cool that it was led by women.
And one of the things that this show dumps the audience right in the middle of the drama, right as soon as it's happening, which for an actor seems like it might be kind of satisfying, because you're working with Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon, Steve Carell. You're all at these heightened levels at all times, because of just the intensity of what's going on. What was it like, just playing scenes with your co-stars, this large ensemble cast, and just getting to go big and emotional?
Yeah.
That way.
I don't have that much experience, just speaking candidly, working with massive movie stars. Most of my experience as a performer came up with my friends or, making small independent films and independent TV shows. So there is always something that happens in my experience where your first few days you're a little starstruck, and then they become human beings just like anybody else, and you get used to it. But I think on this show in particular, for me, since it was such a high level of star power, or whatever you want to call it, and so many of them everywhere you turn, there were more moments certainly where you'd be walking a set, and then you turn a corner on the lot, and then you're walking next to Reese, and you pass Steve Carell, and you come in and you grab a strawberry from craft services next to Jennifer Aniston, and it gets increasingly surreal that you are here doing scenes with these people. But, I would be remiss if I didn't say, like, just how lovely these human beings are. And the more I'm around, I guess what you would call like a movie star, is the more I realize how hard it must be for them to stay open and not guarded as people, because, whenever we're out in public, everybody wants something from them. I can walk the streets. I'm good. Nobody, a couple of people recognize me here and there, but I can do my thing. And yet they are so sweet and open and interested as people. And it's kind of a feat to pull that off in a lot of ways. They're great people.
And coming from the experience of writing and directing and producing independent film as you do, does that affect how you look at sort of other projects in general? Like when it's a project when you're only acting in it, do you sort of have to take off the director hat, writer hat also?
It's interesting. Most of the time when I'm just acting in a project, I'm really enjoying myself because the unilateral nature of the task means my brain isn't separated into too many directions. And frankly, like when I punch out of the clock at the end of the day, I go home and I don't have to worry about it. But obviously, when you're directing and producing, you're always on. It's the difference between being a parent and being like an uncle or an aunt. But I wouldn't say that filmmaker part of my brain ever fully turns off, and particularly when you see a lot of these scenes from the morning show, just from a logistical standpoint, they're really complex. There's a lot of pretty intricate walk and talk scenes where you've got people coming in and out of them, and you got to hand this paper to this person and hit this mark on this certain line and make sure you turn in this direction so that you can head toward the stage. So there's a bit of like a sporting event involved with it to stay present in your character, but also have this other part of your brain really aware of all the logistics and the spatial relationships. And that part where I am a filmmaker and know a lot of those things and I'm used to designing scenes like that made it a lot easier on me. It is something I'm a lot more comfortable with. So I think by the end of the show, they were giving me a lot more of those sort of like crazier big walk and talk scenes, because rather than, I don't know, I see that as like a fun challenge to go for.
And as you mentioned, this is the show is one of the flagship shows for Apple TV Plus, and it's kind of this wild, wide open media environment that we're kind of walking into. And you've also produced for Netflix, and your show Room 104 is on HBO. And what's it like being part of this kind of moment of just having so many different outlets where people can be creative and having had the opportunities to be creative in so many different ways?
I mean, I'm a streaming slut, really. Is what I'm just a whore. I'm all over the place, I think it's a complex question, and we could probably talk for 3 hours about this. The somewhat reductive, condensed version of it for me is that, as a creator who's trying to make somewhat niche things, like you brought up Room 104, that's not a show for everybody. So I'm really glad that it's not 1985 and there are only 3 networks to show it, because I wouldn't have a home and I probably wouldn't have a career. That being said, are we getting to the place where it's too much about winning the streaming war, about winning big viewers, and maybe making too much content? I think it's starting to become a problem. I think the quality is going to go down if it hasn't already. I think people are very overwhelmed with the amount of TV shows and movies on their streaming service queues. I think that they're reluctant to subscribe to another one. So you're seeing price points from Disney and Apple come into the single digit range per month. And I think that can devalue things. So we saw it happen in the music industry, 15 years ago. So I think that it's a good thing and a bad thing, but for a creator like me who's trying to be niche and retain his vision, that it's been ultimately a blessing.
Interestingly, this fall you're also appearing in the film Bombshell, which perhaps coincidentally is also about sort of this media upheaval in this this network amid sexual harassment allegations. How did that opportunity come about, and was it a coincidence that and the morning show sort of came around?
That's a good question. I think that certainly in the ether, the power dynamics in the workplace and all these stories, they are around. So coincidence or zeitgeist, whatever you want to call it. In terms of my involvement in both of them, I think they were sort of separate things, but maybe related in concept. I think the reason I came to the morning show is that I knew Michael Ellenberg really well, one of our producers. He was actually one of my producers on my first studio movie, Cyrus, and I've been talking with Jen Aniston about working together for a long time. We were friendly, and I think that they knew I was the kind of performer who would be very dedicated and very dependable to them, and I think that was important to them in the midst of a show that had a lot of chaos going on. They were rewriting scripts as we went. And in terms of Bombshell, that one was pretty simple. I played Charlize Theron's brother in a movie called Tully that my friend Jason Reitman directed. We got along really, really well. We were really good scene partners. I think I had a seminal understanding that, when I was there to support Charlize in Tully in those scenes, I was there to do just that, make her be great in those scenes. I'm not the lead of that movie, and some performers don't really understand what that truly means. And I think as Charlize and Jay Roach, the director, were thinking about, all right, we need someone to play the husband role, someone who doesn't mind taking the back seat and being the support system inside of there, and someone who Charlize would feel comfortable with. She puts in an unbelievable performance in this movie, and she's got a lot going on, from the accent to, all the different altercations on her face and the makeup standpoint. There's plugs in her nose and things in her cheek to make her look more like Megan, and I think she just wanted a nice, dependable scene partner, who could be there to support her, which was like, look, I'm never going to say no to that.
And you mentioned that transformation that Charlize undergoes. It's interesting, it never looks drastic on the screen. Like, it's not like doesn't look like this huge prosthetic makeup work, and yet she looks so uncannily like Megyn Kelly, and she conveys the voice and the mannerisms. What was it like playing against that sort of, basically almost sharing scenes with Megyn Kelly in a sense, because she's so far in there?
It's wonderful acting opposite Charlize in any scenario, but I would say, this was really cool because it really was a transformation. And as you said, it's kind of a game of inches. It's the accent, it's the makeup, it's the hair, it's the little things here and there, and they all sort of add up to this whole new character. And, what was fun for me is that I always like to improvise a little bit in a scene. When I say improvise, just shake things a little bit up sometimes, change some words, try some surprises, try to keep things fresh. And I was nervous to do that with Charlize in this movie because there's so much preparation involved, and I didn't want to give her another X factor to throw it off. But we did a lot of that, and she was just, she's just so great. She just comes right along and does her thing. And I think she's one of our greats, and I hope that a lot of people see this movie because she deserves it, at least.
I want to congratulate you on The Morning Show and Bombshell and Room 104, which is currently on HBO still, and just everything you're working on, everything you've got in the fire right now and coming up. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Cheers, man. Thank you.